Not only is the hype surrounding the Texas Longhorns in 2026 skyrocketing, but could they actually be underrated? Welcome in to the first ever edition of the Texas Longhorns on SI podcast. I am your host, Matt Galatzan, and joining me is my partner in crime, business partner. We've been together for a long time, good friend of mine, Zach Dimmitt, also of Texas Longhorns on SI. Zach, how does it feel to be back on the air for the first time as a tandem? Kind of.
It feels great, and it comes at a good time. There's lots of stuff going on. I know football isn't happening right now, but there's so much to talk about, so much to look forward to over the next couple weeks and months. Not just football, but baseball, basketball, all those good things, softball as well. Yeah, a lot to talk about, and excited to get this thing rolling.
Yeah, I mean, we decided to get together and start our own podcast, and here we are. We've kind of dabbled in this stuff here in the past, but this is, we're going all in on this one. This is going to be our baby, so we're excited to get going. Hopefully, everybody will join us and become a part of the community. I know there's a lot of people out there who, were upset when Texas Sports Unfiltered and my show Open Gym went off the air. Now I'm back finally, and Zach is joining me as my co-host. We couldn't be more excited. But obviously, the first place to start here, Zach, is football. Texas football is everything in Austin and for Longhorns fans. And we'll get into basketball here in a minute. But since we haven't really gotten a chance to talk a lot of football, since we're just starting this thing out, I thought it would be a good idea to kind of take a 360 view of kind of the hype surrounding Texas football heading into 2026. The transfer portal is in the books. We have a pretty good idea of what the roster is going to look like, and it's becoming a situation where like last year there was so much hype going into the year. Number one overall team in the country, Arch Manning, Heisman favorite, and it all seemed a little premature, especially to me and you. I think we were like, wow, this is starting to get out of control. How could they possibly live up to this hype? But now, after the additions that they've made in the transfer portal, everybody taking a year forward and getting that extra year of experience, Arch Manning making a massive stride throughout the year from being a kind of a inconsistent quarterback, to put it nicely, in the first part of the season, to one of the best quarterbacks in the country by the time it was over. I think it's safe to say that this team is probably the one that Steve Sarkisian wanted heading into 2025, and now he finally has it heading into 2026. It really does feel like this could be Texas's year.
Yeah, this year is a lot different because heading into last season, we didn't know what we were going to get out of Arch Manning. I think the entire country was looking forward to seeing what he could do. Of course, he had shown a little bit when Quinn Ewers had been injured in 2024 a little bit, and he got some run there, and it was pretty nice to see him have that like 67-yard run against UTSA. He started the first ever SEC game for Texas against Mississippi State and looked good. But the pressure wasn't necessarily completely on his shoulders at that point quite yet, because everyone knew that Ewers was going to return, and Texas wouldn't have Arch Manning as a starter until the following year. And so when that pressure finally all hit him, you saw it on like the first pass attempt of the season against Ohio State. He just threw it right into the dirt. He just wasn't all there. And so I think that kind of continued a little bit in non-conference play, as everyone saw. But it all starts with him. Heading into this upcoming season, we still got a long way to go until August, but or even September. So but it took a long way to go. But I think it starts Arch Manning because he's not going to have those kind of jitters, in my opinion. I just don't see it. If he does, it'd be pretty surprising because he's already kind of gotten that monkey off his back and proven what he could do. I mean, Texas was right there on the bubble of college football playoff in large part because of what he was able to do at quarterback. So especially during SEC play against ranked teams, um, you know, everyone's going to look at that Florida game, and obviously that's a big reason why Texas didn't make it, but into the CFP. But Arch Manning did everything he could, and that whole team did everything they could to give themselves a chance to get in. And so now that you put that season behind you, he got those jitters off of him, and you surround him with all the talent we're going to go over here in a second. I don't see why this can't be the year that Texas, not only can they make it to the national championship, can they win it? I think so. Certainly, you don't want to, get your expectations too high because we're still in February, obviously. But certainly, it's going to be a different team than last season.
Yeah, and we'll get into the offensive additions and the defensive additions, specifically the offensive additions in the second segment of the show. Then we'll get into the defense, a little later in the week. But one of the reasons that there is so much hype surrounding this team, outside of Arch Manning, outside of the transfer portal additions, outside of Ryan Wingo coming back, and all the retentions that they had that were very key players for them, Jelani McDonald, Trevor Gooseby, Colin Simmons, on and on and on. A lot of coaching staff changes that people are very, very excited about. First and foremost, obviously, bringing Will Muschamp back to Austin, I think, is a absolutely massive, massive deal. Not only are you going to be changing your defensive philosophy in terms of like the schematics of it, which, we all love PK. He was a great coach for Texas. Nothing against him whatsoever. But the style of defense that Will Muschamp plays, the aggressiveness, the man coverage, all of the different, things that he likes to deploy on the defensive side of the football are things that are built to win in the SEC. He's proved it time and time again as a defensive coordinator that he knows how to coach elite defenses in this league. Texas can now get back to that. No more of this 15-yard cushion on 3rd and 5 with the game on the line. He's going to be playing man press coverage, and he's going to get after it. And if you beat him, you beat him. But he's not gonna give it to you. And I like that about what they're doing defensively. They bring back Blake Gideon, which is a huge, huge addition as well. He was in Austin a couple years ago. And when he was there, Texas had the number 1 pass defense in the country. He leaves. He goes to Georgia Tech as a defensive coordinator. He is now back as a defensive passing game coordinator, which also helped you retain defensive players like Derek Williams and some of the other guys in that secondary. So across the board, the coaching additions, the talent additions in the portal have all played a major role. But let's be real. The reason that there is this much hype surrounding Texas, regardless of what they have done in the portal, is Arch Manning. He the quarterback is the lightning rod. The quarterback is the reason for optimism or the reason for pessimism with any football team in the country. You have a guy who can do everything, who proved sitting back in a pocket that was leaky as hell last year that he could not only withstand the pressure, be tough, and help you win games, but he elevated everybody around him, and he became a truly, truly elite playmaker and a guy that can take over a game and win it for you, like he did against Michigan, like he did in the second half against Texas A&M, like he did almost all the way down the stretch, Mississippi State, all of these games that it looked like Texas could be down and out. Yeah, he didn't get it done against Georgia. Not a lot of people did. But outside of that, he proved that he was one of the top quarterbacks in the country. And now that you're surrounding him with a bunch of weapons, which we'll get into in a minute, it's just a really exciting thing.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, when you can have a quarterback that can win the game on his own, you don't want to rely on that, obviously, but it certainly can help in certain big moments during the season. Um, you mentioned the Michigan game. I know that the stakes weren't as high for that one, but man, I mean, there was a lot of people watching that game, and Arch Manning proved that he can win the game in the fourth quarter. In multiple ways. The throw he made to Kalik Lockett in the back of the end zone there, that wasn't a throw that would have been able to make at certain times early in the season. And the way that he was able to use his legs. I'm interested to see how Sark continues to utilize him in the run game, in certain spots, because early in the year when Arch was struggling, he would kind of look, first, second read isn't there, and then he'd scramble and he'd pick up some good yardage, and it's great because he's a great athlete. But later in the SEC play, you take a look at his rushing numbers; they were way down because he was way more comfortable in the pocket, and that was much to do with the offensive line improving a little bit. It still was not a great year for that group, but they did show some improvement. And so he was able to actually have a pocket to throw out of, but it also has to do with his confidence that was growing, where he doesn't feel like he needs to run every time. If you ever played any of the college football video games or Madden, it's super easy to just sit there with your running quarterback and just run around because you're scared to throw an interception. That's kind of a weird comparison, but it's true. It kind of translates to real life as well. If the quarterback doesn't feel comfortable, he's just going to sit there and just run as quick as he can. So, yeah, I'm really excited to see what Arch can do there. And you mentioned Will Muschamp as well. I like that addition a lot. A lot of people were thinking that it was kind of a controversial move, myself included at first, because I thought Pete Kwiatkowski was great the past 5 years that he was here. Texas's defense had always been super, super steady. And so, some fans might think, oh, what did PK do wrong? It wasn't really what he did wrong. It was just a different philosophy, like you mentioned, a bit more aggressive. And so, Will Muschamp, obviously a former Longhorn coming back, not only that, but what can he do when this defense is a little bit more aggressive? What can that result in? Sure, will it lead to potential big plays down the field because you're being overly aggressive, or will it benefit Texas in a major way? We'll have to wait and see. But I like that move as well. And I don't know if you mentioned it, but Jabbar Jalouk is running backs coach. Yeah. They completely changed that position, added him to the fold. So excited to see what the running game can do, because it was the worst rushing offense under Sarkisian during his time at Texas.
Yeah, it was. It was. I think the worst Longhorns rushing attack since like World War II. That's how bad it was in Austin. It it could only go up, right? It could only get better from where it was, and they made a lot of moves to not only improve that running game, but protect Arch Manning and give him more weapons as well. And in our next segment, after our first ad break ever, we are going to get into exactly what they did offensively to, turn themselves into a national champion contender. So stick with us after this break, and we'll be right back.
This episode of the Texas Longhorns on SI podcast is brought to you by Custom Built Trailers of Mississippi. Custom Built Trailers is the largest in-stock trailer dealer in Mississippi, with a variety of options to choose from flatbed goosenecks to bumper pull equipment trailers and car haulers to enclosed trailers and basic utility trailers. We do a little bit of everything. And if we don't have exactly what you're looking for in stock, we can typically have your custom built trailer built in 7 to 10 working days. 0% financing options are available, and we also deliver out of state. So give Custom Built Trailers of Mississippi a call at 601-722-9581 today and let us take care of your hauling needs. Custom Built Trailers of Mississippi. If we don't have it, we'll be glad to build it.
Thanks to my good buddy Dalton for providing us with our first ad as the Texas Longhorns on SI podcast. But let's get into it, Zach. A lot of additions on the offensive side of the ball for Texas in the transfer portal. We'll get into recruiting and stuff later as we go in the week, but transfer portal is still very fresh on everybody's mind. So I thought we could run through every move they made, kind of give everybody a refresh of the additions in our favorite moves and all of the things that they were able to do in what was one of the best portal classes in the entire country. Obviously, you start with the big one that everyone is super excited about in Cam Coleman. He gives you the big-bodied ex-wide receiver playmaker that pairs perfectly with Ryan Williams on the other side, Ryan Wingo on the other side of the field. You have Coleman running vertical. You got Wingo running horizontal, and then you'll have Emmett Mosley operating in the middle of the field with your tight ends and the other receivers in this room. But he himself has elevated this Texas offense to a point, and we'll get into the running backs in a second, but simply the addition of Cam Coleman has elevated this offense to such a degree that it opens everything else up and makes it easier to do everything else that you need to do because he draws so much attention on that side of the field.
Absolutely. Ryan Wingo entered last season. No one's going to match the kind of hype that Arch was warranting, but Ryan Wingo entered last season with tons of hype as well because he had been a true freshman in 2024, but he was behind Matthew Golden, Isaiah Bond. And so you were kind of hoping he would step up in a major way. And he did, but there was certainly some growing pains last season. And so now you add Cam Coleman to the mix. It takes a lot of pressure off Ryan Wingo because Sarkisian even said, I believe it was like after the Ohio State game and the few days after that game, he said, we need to do a better job of, taking some of the pressure off of Ryan's shoulders. And it's not that he can't handle the pressure or anything like that, but it's just because they're asking him to do quite a lot. And so when you add Cam Coleman, Wingo's not going to be facing any sort of double coverage. He's going to show what he can do with the ball in his hands, which is some great things as we saw this past season. He's not really a guy that can consistently beat you down the field, but after the catch is where I think he really can thrive. And so add Emmett Mosley to that list as well as a guy that's going to have a lot of pressure off of him. I loved what he did last season in that receiving room. Started the season off injured, so it kind of took him some time to find his feet. And I think he's a major piece of this offense. Cam Coleman's obviously the number one, but I think Wingo and Mosley are, they can share that number two wide receiver role for all I care. I mean, I think they're both so important, for the entire stretch of the season because Coleman's going to have those days where he's going to be heavily covered. And you're going to need Wingo or Mosley to step up. Maybe even Dalen McCutcheon, who's a true freshman this past season. Maybe he has a breakout year as a depth piece. We'll just have to wait and see. But you're right, Cam Coleman, he's gonna have some big games, but when he doesn't, you have a lot of trust in the guys that are gonna be behind him. I don't really think that's somebody he had at Auburn. I know Eric Singleton was a highly recruited transfer guy with the Tigers last year, so he had something similar to that. But I don't think that he had nearly the kind of quarterback play that he's gonna be having next season. So it'll be a lot different. So really excited what that whole group can do. And of course, seeing what Cam Coleman can do. And fans will have to wait long because that Texas spring game is only about 2 months away. And man, there's going to be some highlights to be had.
Yes, there absolutely will be. The addition of Cam Coleman is massive because if you talk about the Texas wide receiver group from last year, it was fairly obvious who the number one guy was. I know that Parker Livingston was a part of it, and DeAndre Moore was a part of it, and Emmett Mosley was a big part of it in just 9 games that he played. He was a big impact, but Ryan Wingo was overwhelmingly the most targeted wide receiver on this team. He had 94 targets last year. 94. The next closest was DeAndre Moore at 49. That's how much they relied on Ryan Wingo throughout the year. Now you get another legitimate number one threat to take away some of that pressure, get him a little bit more open and not have to put him in situations where he's not necessarily comfortable, like those downfield shots where it's a one-on-one 50-50 ball. That's not his game. That is Cam Coleman's game, and it is going to be a big help to have him there. You move on now to the running back room. And again, Texas just hit an absolute home run and a half with what they were able to do in the running back room. Not only do they bring in Raleek Brown from Arizona State, who is your kind of lightning jitterbug, game breaking big play guy that is going to be very, very good in the outside zone run game, which it kind of seems like Texas is going to be doing a lot of next year with their additions in the running back room. Not only do you bring him in, which would have been, I mean, he would have been the best running back on the Texas roster if Trey Wisner was still there, if CJ Baxter was still there. He's that good. But now you also bring in Hollywood Smothers, flip him from Alabama, who, physically kind of looks like you're also your kind of outside running jitterbug lightning type, but that's not really his game. It's different. He's much better in between the tackles than people give him credit for. He's very good after contact. He makes people miss in tight spaces. And if you watched him at North Carolina State last year when he was healthy, he was unbelievable. He was one of the best running backs in the country. There was a reason he was one of the top running backs in the portal that was available this offseason. You had both of those guys. I mean, your running back room went from a C maybe to, in my opinion, a high B plus, A minus, and now you have probably one of the best running back tandems in the SEC, and I don't know that it's close.
For sure. After Texas landed Raleek Brown, pretty sure a lot of people thought that, that's probably it. We got our starter. Maybe Texas will get a few depth guys throw in there, but Raleek Brown's gonna be the guy. And no, that certainly wasn't the case. And I think that's for the best that they added Smothers along with Raleek Brown. I know there was some like quick uncertainty that Raleek Brown would try to like get out of his letter of intent or whatever because of the addition of Smothers, and that was quickly dispelled. So the fact you have both of those guys, that's kind of championship backfield you need, because you don't want to just rely on one guy to take all these carries the entire season. Then by the time you're potentially in the CFP, he's worn down, he's injured. And so you want to, trade these guys off, Raleek Brown and Smothers, throughout the season. And then you kind of maybe figure out who you want to lean on the most, hopefully both. But if one guy gets injured, we've seen this happen, obviously, every season when it comes to injuries, especially at running back, if someone goes down, you have another starting caliber guy right there. I love both additions, and the fact that Smothers, his commitment came, I don't know how long it was, 30 minutes after Cam Coleman announced his commitment. He clearly has, seen the championship level expectations that Steve Sarkisian's put in forth this offseason. He wanted to be a part of that. I really like what Raleek Brown did last season at Arizona State. I think he had 250 yards against Colorado. I knew Colorado was awful, but if you're doing that at the power 4 level, you're an elite running back. And so he's gonna have some breakaway speed that we did not really see at all from the Texas running back room this past season. It seemed like the only big runs that the team had were from Arch Manning or Quintravion Wisner once against Oklahoma, and then that had a big run against A&M. That was about it. So I think you're going to see much more of that next season. Smothers, I mean, both guys can kind of catch the ball out of the backfield. That's not really what either one of them is, particularly the best at, is because you want their strengths to be, between the tackles and breakaway speed, but both guys can certainly catch the ball out of the backfield. I think that'll be big as well. So interesting to see who will be the starter for the season opener against Texas State. Currently, if you go to ourlads.com, Hollywood Smothers is listed the starter. Doesn't mean he's going to be starting though in week 1. So that could flip flop back and forth. We really don't know, because both guys are starting caliber players, and that can change throughout the season. So I'm just excited to see what happens there, because you have two guys that'll really change the backfield for sure.
Yeah, and look, Raleek Brown, he's your Jaden Blue. Yeah, everybody remembers what Jaden Blue was able to do in 2024 with the Longhorns being such a home run threat. That I mean, he might not be as fast as Jaden Blue. There are very few people who are as fast as Jaden Blue, but he's that type of player. He brings that type of dynamic to your rushing attack. And then, you talk about Hollywood Smothers as well. I mean, this is a guy that he wasn't on the best team. North Carolina State didn't have the best talent in the country. They had some good players, obviously, because they got absolutely gutted by the transfer portal. But, he's a guy that gives you your every down back type that can really, everybody wanted something akin to what they had in 2023 right? When it was CJ Baxter and Jonathan Brooks and this dynamic rushing attack, or even 2022 when it was Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson. And this isn't that type of like power dynamic that those two running backs had in either of those two seasons, but it's a legit 1-2 punch with different skill sets that can give you a really, really good rushing attack. And with the additions they made on the offensive line and their ability to, to move along that offensive line now, be a little bit more physical with the outside zone rushing attack, I think it's going to be fantastic. Both of those guys are going to fit in very, very well. And speaking of that offensive line, they made multiple additions. And obviously, yes, we did forget to talk a little bit about Sterling Buckholter at wide receiver, by the way. I forgot about that one. Good backup ex wide receiver, will be very good. But on the offensive line, it started off a little slow. People were a little bit worried about what they were doing because obviously Texas had one of the worst offensive lines in the country, or at least in the SEC last season for a good portion of it. When Cole Hudson was at center and your left guard was a rotating door of bad, Arch Manning was taking an absolute beating. And then they kind of, piecemealed it together throughout the rest of the season and put a Band-Aid on it. And then when the offseason came, they kind of pushed some guys out the door and they were like, all right, we're restarting from scratch. We're bringing back Trevor Goosby. We're bringing back Connor Robertson. We're bringing back Brandon Baker and some of these young guys. But the additions they made all will not only help with depth with Dylan Sikorsky and Jonte Newman, but they also brought in a couple of starting caliber guys with Melvin Siani and Lawrence Seymour. Now, granted, Lawrence Seymour, his whole thing with the eligibility is still technically up in the air, though I don't think they would have made that addition if they didn't feel very good about him making it to the roster next season. But Melvin Siani gives you an excellent right tackle that's very good in run blocking, very physical, can move very well. It allows you to move Brandon Baker probably to left guard, I would imagine, to be put next to Trevor Goosby. And then you can slide Lawrence Seymour in, a second-team All-American by some outlets, Lawrence Seymour at guard. He will probably be your right guard. And then you bring back the experienced Connor Robertson, and now you have a starting five of Trevor Goosby at left tackle, Brandon Baker at left guard, Connor Robertson at center, Lawrence Seymour at right guard, Melvin Siani at right tackle. It looks like a completely different offensive line and one that could compete very, very well in the SEC.
It wasn't going to get much worse for the offensive line for Texas. I did mention that they improved at the end of this, as the season went on, and they deserve credit for that. But it wasn't going to get much worse, especially considering the standards that Steve Sarkisian is going to have for his offensive line if you want to compete for a championship. So they had to make additions. And I know Jordan Seaton was the big guy that everyone wanted. He probably was asking for 2 arms and 2 legs from Steve Sarkisian to commit to Texas. And so I just don't think it was worth it. I'm kind of looking back, probably think it's for the best that Texas didn't do that. Let Lane Kiffin spend all the money that he has in NIL on Jordan Seaton, because I think Melvin Siani was a great addition, out of Wake Forest. Tons of experience, the right tackle spot. And, talk about the additions, but certainly the retentions, arguably just as big, if not more, especially when you get Trevor Goosby back, Brandon Baker as well, Connor Robinson at center. So I think that this offensive line will be improved just by default. Not trying to disregard those guys in any way. I just think it wasn't the performance that anyone expected, especially in that coaching staff. So Dylan Sikorsky, nice depth piece as well. Some of these guys don't have tons of experience, and so it'll be interesting to see what they can do. And from a depth perspective, not only this year, but then potentially growing into a starting caliber player in the year to follow. Jonte Newman from A&M is one of those guys. Only get a single snap this past year at A&M. So they clearly are looking to build a starting group, but also build for the future. Because sometimes these portal guys, it seems like we're just a one and done. You're probably going to be here for a year, and then maybe you're off somewhere else. But some of these pieces on the offensive line were almost like a high school recruiting piece where they're not going to contribute right away, and you're expecting that to change in a year or two and develop them. So I like what they did there for sure. And man, it can't be overstated how big the addition or the retention of Trevor Gooseby was, because he could have been a day 2 NFL draft pick potentially. And so you got to love that. I know he's recovering from minor offseason surgery, so he should be good to go and for that season opener. Interesting to see who will play in the spring game. Maybe he won't. I don't know. But you gotta love all those additions, especially Melvin Siani.
Yeah, and also let's not forget the addition of Michael Masunis, the tight end. Texas ran a lot of 12 personnel last year, and they weren't able to do it very successfully because they didn't have that big inline physical blocking, mauling tight end that can really be a plus in run blocking. And Michael Masunis is absolutely that. He's going to play a major role, and he's pretty good at catching the football too. So additions at almost every position along the offensive side of the ball, all of them. I mean, you got, what are you returning now? 3 starters, 4 starters, 5. I mean, you're going to have 6 new starters on offense, maybe 5, depending on who ends up starting at tight end between Nick Townsend and Michael Masunis, which will probably be a schematic thing, like in a matchup type thing on the opening script. But half of your offense is new, and I think that's going to play a major role in how good this offense can be next season. But Zach, let's change gears. We've talked a lot of Texas football here over the first 30 minutes, and it's gone a little bit longer than I think we expected it to in our first episode, which, hey, we're a little excited to be on the air with you guys, so give us a break. Basketball. Texas Longhorns basketball is on an absolute heater right now. They have now won 4 in a row, 5 of their last 6, and they've beaten Georgia, who was ranked number 21 at the time, and then they went on to beat Oklahoma, South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Missouri all in a row. And all but one of these games, all but one of this 4-game win streak is by double digits. In the South Carolina game, they won by 9. They've been looking really good lately. They've been looking really good offensively and defensively, just on both sides of the ball. And Zach is our basketball expert here. So, Zach, tell us exactly what is going on with this basketball team. What have they done that has helped them turn the corner here in the last couple of weeks and go from, at the start of SEC play, like, oh man, I don't know if this team's going to win an SEC game or, compete for anything in the SEC, to now a team that needs to be feared in the SEC because they can compete with anybody, it seems.
Yeah, it's all started with the defense. Texas is still not an elite defensive team under Sean Miller, and that certainly needs to change in the seasons to come. But their defense has taken a step forward from being really not that great at all to being a little bit decent these past couple of weeks. And all the while, the offense has consistently been very efficient and pretty much elite when you look at the numbers. I mean, it's kind of surprising that Texas is considered like one of a top 10 offense in the country at this point in the year. And you may not think so by watching them, but they're very efficient. They have great shot makers, but at the same time, get a lot of their points in the paint from the free throw line, so they're getting good points per possession. That leads to great analytics, and that leads to great rankings when it comes to the national scale. So the defense has been able to hold its own, because in losses to A&M, Kentucky, even that Mississippi State loss in this SEC opener, the defense was not what it needed to be. And Sean Miller has publicly, said that our defense needs to improve, and that's putting it lightly, because he doesn't really sugarcoat things. So it's been really impressive what they've been able to do. You talk about 4 ranked wins this season: Georgia, Vanderbilt, Alabama, NC State. Those are all ranked wins, and those are wins that'll ride with them to Selection Sunday. But along the way, you talk about this 4-game winning streak. On the road to Oklahoma, you take care of business at home against South Carolina and Ole Miss. So those, you never complain about a close win, no matter who the opponent is. And then you take care of business on the road against Missouri on Saturday. That was a pretty impressive win to me, watching that game, because Missouri just came off a big road win against A&M. They've beaten Florida this season. they've been inconsistent at times, but it's still a scary team to face, especially at this point in the season when the bubble is as heated as it is. And Texas was right there on the bubble, the NCAA tournament bubble. Potentially it could sway from then moving into the field or moving out with a loss. And they took care of business in that second half. 17-point win. Missouri, I think, went over 7 minutes without a field goal, and so that just shows you what Texas's defense has done when it comes to improving. And so you got to be impressed with what they've been able to do. Tomorrow, it's a kind of a quick turnaround a little bit. Face LSU at home. The Tigers are not very good this season, but they did just battle with Tennessee and Knoxville on Saturday, and that was kind of a closer game than people expected. And so LSU, I think they were like 14-12 this year, 2-11 in the SEC or something like that. And so it hasn't been a great year, but Texas should not take it lightly because a loss against LSU at home might be a quad 3 loss, quad 2, something like that. And so that would really hurt all the momentum you've been building. And so Texas needs to take care of business. If they get a few more wins, I'd say maybe 2 wins, certainly 3, regardless of who it comes against, likely puts them in the field. Even if that means the first 4, that likely puts them in the field, because an SEC team that's approaching 20 wins with solid metrics and 4 ranked wins is probably not going to get left out of the field. I just don't see it happening. So you got to take care of business in some of these games coming up. And if you can seal a ranked win, then you're essentially sealing up your spot in the bracket. Still more work to do, but you got to be impressed with what they're doing this season, especially with the way things started in conference play, because it was not looking too great, and they really had to turn things around.
Yeah, and obviously a big part of that turnaround is Dalen Swain. Dalen Swain has been unbelievable, especially in SEC play for the Longhorns. Right now he's averaging 17.6 points, 7.3 rebounds, 3.3 or 3.4 assists per game. If you look at the statistics across the board, he leads the team in points, rebounds, assists, and steals with 1.9 steals per game. The only major stat he doesn't lead them in is blocks, which is Modest Voikatitis with 0.9 blocks per game. But so far in SEC play, he didn't play particularly well against Ole Miss. He played 37 minutes and had 7 points. But if you go all the way back to the Kentucky game, let's say, he's had 29 points, 26 points, 30 points, 18 points, 22 points, the 7 against Ole Miss, and then 25 again against Missouri. Sean Miller has found something special. He also had 34 against Mississippi State, by the way, 18 against Alabama. So Sean Miller has found something special in Dalen Swain, and it's starting to get to the point where this guy could be a first-round NBA draft pick, or even maybe a lottery pick if he keeps playing this way, especially throughout March and gets hot in what many people consider the best or the best postseason in all of college sports. You hope that he's going to be at least a part of the plans next year. But if he keeps playing this way, man, he could find himself with All-American status and become, something that is going to be really hard to keep a hold of when it comes to the 2026-2027 season.
Yeah, I would be shocked if he returned next season, because the amount of NBA draft stock or NBA draft hype he's been gaining has been very significant, especially when you talk about his jump shot. I remember before the season when we met with all the players, I asked him, what's your confidence like in your jump shot? Like, how have NBA scouts, what have they told you about that area of your game? And he said the confidence has been there for him. It's just about, getting the reps up in game. And you can see it. The confidence is there. I mean, he's been taking off the dribble, end of shot clock threes. And I don't even think he expected that from himself this season. 3 threes against Missouri. He had 4 threes against Auburn in that loss. I believe all of last season he had 4 threes made at Xavier. And of course, he didn't have the kind of usage there. But I mean, that's just crazy 1-year turnaround for him, especially as a jump shooter, because he can do pretty much everything else on the court. He's a mismatch offensively. He can defend multiple positions. He can pass the ball. He can handle the ball. He's great in the paint. And the only thing was that jump shot that he really had to get down. And he's been proving that he can certainly shoot. And he's not a liability in that area. He's not an elite shooter. but he's not a liability at all. And so teams are going to have to not leave him open anymore, because against Missouri, one of his first threes he made, they kind of just didn't close out on him very much, and he drained it. And then he made 2 more for the rest of that game. So I'd be shocked if he returns next season, because the stock has been going way up. You would certainly hope that he could return. I don't know what kind of NIL package the program's going to have waiting for him, but he's worked his way into first round status, and he certainly deserves it because of the way he's been playing and leading this team. I don't want him to all of a sudden, not play well, and his stock goes down, because that means Texas is not going to succeed, because he's the driving force of the team. But you gotta not be too greedy. So he's done what he can this season, and he's probably going to be gone next year. It just is what it is.
6 games left in the season for the Longhorns in the regular season. 3 of them are on the road. 3 of them are at home. And it's a pretty tough stretch, Zach. You get LSU on Tuesday night. That will be a one that they should win. And there haven't been a lot of games on the schedule throughout SEC play where you're like, all right, Texas is going to win this game. This is one they should win. And then they have to go on the road to Georgia. Then they have the Florida Gators in Austin at the Mood, and then 2 straight road games against A&M and at Arkansas, who is a really freaking good team.
Oh, yeah.
And then you close out the season against Oklahoma. So a big stretch coming up for the Longhorns. If they can go 3-3 over this stretch, they're a tournament team.
Yep.
I fully believe that. They're currently sitting at 16-9. You'd like to get to the 20-win mark just to take all questions out of that, and that's kind of the magic number, I think, for most teams, especially if you get to 20 wins and you're an SEC team, you're going to have a pretty good shot to get into the tournament. But if you can go 3-3 over this stretch, I feel pretty good about Texas's chances of getting to March Madness. But we will be back to talk, to recap the LSU game on Wednesday. We may hop on tomorrow. I think we're probably going to, our first week, we may go Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but we may go all 5 days. We'll see how it goes. But we will be back. Thank you for joining us. Make sure to follow us on X at Longhorns on SI. Follow me on X at Matt Galatzan. Follow follow Zach on X at Zach Dimmitt 7. And, just like, subscribe, comment, do all the things to help, with the engagement of our podcast. We're really excited to get this thing started. And hey, comment on our live stream too. We'd love to get you guys involved in the conversation, answer any questions you might have, and all those things. But until then, we will see you next time, and peace out.